Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the new moon in Cancer, which takes place on the 29th of June at 2:53 in the morning, UTC, and so that you can adjust the time accordingly, however distant you are from that Greenwich meridian point. Now, this new moon is kind of an interesting new moon because of what's going on at the time. It forms and the exact aspects it's making. And I'm going to talk about that when we start to look at the new moon in the context of the whole chart. But in general, just a little bit of a point about the new moon, because I know a lot of you are quite interested about the astronomy of a new moon or a full moon, so to speak. And I think people are a little bit confused sometimes when I say you can't see the new moon, because lo and behold, of course, you look in the sky and there you see that little sliver and you say, oh, look, there's the new moon. But actually the new moon has occurred before you can even start to see that little sickle shape forming in the sky. And what happens really is that the moon comes between the earth and the sun. So it's the backside of the moon, so to speak, that's lit up by the sun, and we can't see it at all. And that's why we don't see a new moon. But all new moons, whatever sign they fall in, are signs of new chapters opening. And as you know, my big thing really about astrology and why I do these videos and I write all the things that I do is because I think astrology is such a beautiful guide. It's a kind of way of living our life with a sense of rhythm with the cosmos, if you like. And the new moon, full moon cycle is such a good way of doing that. Because we can see the new moon, we see the full moon, and it mirrors this idea of new beginnings and then closure and completion and closing the chapters, which happens at the full moon. So in this occasion, or on this occasion, the new moon on the 29th of June has its ending, if you like, at the full moon in Cancer of January the 6th, 2023. So you might want to look at the things you consciously start and focus on around the time of this new moon on the 29th of June, because it has its fruition, or at least it will show you elements of that fruition in 6 months' time. And of course, certain things just come into our lives around the time of a new moon, and they mark a new beginning that we weren't planning to make, they just happen. And again, we can look 6 months down the line and see where we are, whether that project, that relationship is done and dusted, or whether it's just marked the end of a stage of that project or that relationship. And then we start another one, or we look at notching it up a stage, if you like, on or at the time of the full moon. And of course, there's a smaller kind of cycle as well in the 2 weeks from the new moon to the full moon, when the moon is waxing. And a lot of the things that I talk about will take those full 2 weeks to really manifest in some way. And I'll be dealing with that sign by sign, house by house, as I go through the zodiac a little bit further on. Now, I also want to mention at this time why this full moon new moon is a significant one, is that it takes place just after the summer solstice. The sun enters a sign of Cancer on the 21st of June, and that's an important peak. It's a zodiac peak. In the northern hemisphere, yes, it's the summer solstice, and in the southern hemisphere, of course, it's the winter solstice, if you like. But as far as astrology goes, we're stubbornly kind of programmed to look at it from above the equator, so to speak. And at the summer solstice, the Earth is closest to the sun. That's why we have more sunlight. That's why it's brighter. That's why it's warmer. That's why we're at the peak of all that energy-giving power of the sun. And the reverse is the case in the northern hemisphere. But what's interesting, of course, from that point, that summer solstice point, is that the sun is in decline, or rather we are moving again gradually further and further away from the sun, and it appears to be withdrawing its light from us. And this idea of that cycle of peaks and troughs is something I'm going to take up as I come to my conclusion at the end of this video. Now, the summer solstice, or the Cancer ingress, as it's called, is another very important astrological marker. We set up a chart depending on the country that you want to look at, whether it's England or Australia or Afghanistan, anywhere in the world. Take the capital city, have a look at where that new moon, or in this case, we're looking at the summer solstice, where the sun in Cancer and all the planets in their groupings around that point, you know, what it looks like. We take from that and interpret the next quarter. Now, I have done this with you before. I've looked at the ingress charts, the Aries ingress or Libra ingress, the Capricorn ingress, even the Cancer ingress I've done. But on this occasion, I'm not going to do that because I've got another little thing up my sleeve, which I'd rather like to look at. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get straight to the chart so that we can have a look at the position of the new moon in the context of everything else that's going on around it. So if you look at this chart, I've set it from the point of view of Helsinki, which of course is the capital of Finland. So this is relevant to Finland. It's not the summer solstice chart, or the Cancer ingress, so we're not going to take anything from it really in terms of what it says about the next quarter for Finland. But it's our map for looking at where the configurations are so that we can see them and focus on them and get to know our astrology. So we see the new moon, the sun and moon together at 7 Cancer 23, at that position between 9 and 10 in the morning, just above the horizon. And the important thing about this new moon, and if we look at that figure, 7 degrees, we can see another planetary hieroglyph at 7 degrees, and that is the planet Jupiter, up around the midday position, which is also 7 degrees of Aries. And this means that that new moon is squaring Jupiter. And that's really, really important. And I'm going to come to that shortly. I just want to look at some other things here, which are important in that run up to the new moon. Now, I've already talked about the Cancer ingress. And now I want to look at something else going on during the course of that week. And that's the planet Neptune. And Neptune is that trident image just to the left-hand side of the big vertical line I've drawn in. And Neptune is stationary at the time of, well, just before that new moon. And of course, if you think about, you know, the new moon at the 29th of June, that's about, well, 4 or 5 days before Independence Day in the United States. So the whole pattern of what's going on at this time is also relevant to those big Independence Day celebrations. So we have Neptune stationary, about to turn retrograde. And when a planet is stationary, it's supersized, its effects. So we know from Neptune how much inspiration we get from this planet, how otherworldly this planet can be, its connection with the film world, with the world of dreams and imaginings and reflections. But it's also a planet of chaos. It's a planet of confusion. It's a planet of disinformation, of outright lies, and certainly so relevant to the times we live in, fake news. So all these things are at their peak almost at the time of this new moon. So all of us must really be on the lookout for things that may not be quite what they seem. And we need to do that in our own lives, with the events that we're dealing with and the people who are coming into our lives. Is that person really who they say they are? Is what we've just seen real? Is that offer real? Is that situation really what it is? And of course, we need to extend that out to the world itself and the information we get from different parts of the world, all those very big situations happening in different parts of the world, is it real? You know, are we seeing the full facts? And the chances are we probably aren't. And in fact, what really boosts what I'm saying here is that by the time we get to the 2nd of July, Mercury is going to be square that Neptune. Neptune is stationary retrograde on the 28th of June, the day before the new moon, and on the 2nd of July, we have Mercury squaring Neptune. So the potential for Neptune to be even more confusing is really powerful. And I would say, especially if you're celebrating Independence Day, and that is going to involve some kind of travel or some kind of events that are going on around you, that there will surely be some complications at this time, some misinformation, some delays, some cancellations, losses, goodness knows what's going on at this time. So plan well, be elastic in your plans, and certainly if they involve air travel, leave a huge amount of time for those journeys, and don't forget to have a security blanket in terms of a good insurance policy in case your flight is cancelled or something, or the weather interferes with your flight. Now, of course, the other thing that I'm looking at in this chart, and you can probably see it, you can see Mars there at 25 degrees of Aries, and it's coming up to square Pluto, which it is going to do. Pluto 27 of Capricorn is going to do that also on the 2nd, at the same time as that Mercury-Neptune square. And I have one word that I use when there's a Pluto transit, especially to Mars, but you can get it with the other personal planets as well, not just Mars, but particularly with Mars. One word: confrontation. Now, it's a good word because when we confront something, we're ready to face it. And all of us need to do that periodically in our lives. We need to face it. What do we need to face? The elephant in the living room always, because once we look at that elephant in the living room, we can figure out a way to get it out of the living room. Confrontation means that. But also confrontation can mean conflict. And of course, we have so many situations in the world at the moment that are, in conflict, that this might be a particularly difficult time. We get the idea of the fog of war. We get really difficult battles. And of course, there can be political battles and all sorts of things going on in different countries, and maybe particularly in England with the vote of confidence or no confidence in the Prime Minister occurring, and there are all sorts of question marks hanging over Boris Johnson's future. And this can also apply to other leaders in different parts of the world. Pick any country, pick any leader. No leader is having it particularly easy. And during this time with this kind of setup, we've got some difficulties here. So I said I'd come to the new moon, and I really want to look at that idea of the new moon squaring Jupiter, 90 degrees away from Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet that we always associate with growth, with expansion, with abundance. It's a planet we look to for good things, good opportunities, good fortune. Every planet has a role in the solar system and in astrological life, and a lot of Jupiter's roles are very good news indeed. So to have this new moon squaring Jupiter, Jupiter is boosting the power of the new moon. The new moon is connecting to the principles of growth and abundance. So you can see that for many people in many situations, this is going to be extremely fortunate. And either on the day of the new moon itself, or as we go through those consecutive 2 weeks, there are going to be events which make us jump up and down for joy. We have experienced some growth, good fortune, and expansion in our own lives. The same really when we look outside on the world stage and see that there is cause for celebration. But hey, just before we walk away from this and say, oh, isn't that great? let's not forget that other word for Jupiter. Yes, I know you're there before me, inflation. And my goodness, don't we already have a problem with inflation? In almost every country, there is galloping inflation. Jupiter's signature is on that. So we may also be looking at the inflation of problems, inflation period, all those things that mean something is spiraling out of control. So before I put away this chart, I want to draw your attention to that Pluto position, 27 Capricorn. And remember, I've set this from Helsinki. In other words, it's in reference to Finland. And guess what? And I'm going to come away from there, back to me just for a second. And what I'm going to put up now instead is the chart of Finland itself. And you're probably ahead of me as you see this coming into the screen. We can see that Finland's midheaven is 27 of Capricorn. So what does that tell you? That tells you that Pluto is on the midheaven of Finland at the moment, and has been for a little while, will be into next year as well. And what do we find happening in Finland? A raft of kind of political developments, but specifically, what do we know? We know that Finland has applied to join NATO in view of the threat posed by Russia. And this has certainly set the cat among the pigeons in terms of Finland's relationship with Russia. And also, there are sure to be parts of or groups of the Finnish people who are not really happy with that. I mean, I've actually been up to that point in the very north tip of Norway, where Finland is 7 miles and Russia is 8 miles. They're really, really close together. And you can see the influence that's come into that country from old. And yet the need now to be an independent European sovereign country is much more important, regardless of its roots and connections with the Soviet Union as it was, and before that, old Russia as it was. And we see that really brought into life as we look at these two things. But what I also want to point out, as you probably noticed in the chart of the new moon, that the MCIC axis, the highest point of the horoscope and the lowest point of the horoscope, it's right over there on the right-hand side. It's heading towards the ascendant. And that's because by the time we go further and further north, the earth is getting squeezed, if you like. And so that this is why we get endless day in the summer in these very far north countries, and endless night in the winter, because of that part of the earth that's even further away or even closer to the sun at these particular times. So I'm going to come away and come back to me for a minute or two, because I also said that this time I'm not going to be looking at the Ingress chart and from the perspective of a country, just to see what the quarter ahead looks like. But what I am going to take a look at is someone whose birthday it is on the 21st of June, on the summer solstice. And that birthday is celebrated by Prince William this year, who is 40 on the 21st of June. Now, I'm going to put Prince William's chart up for you to have a look at, because it's a very, very interesting chart. Now, you can see again, he was born on a new moon, the sun conjunct moon, and we can see that just above the western horizon there. But this wasn't just any old new moon, it was a solar eclipse, not a total solar eclipse, but a solar eclipse. And we can see that because of its proximity to the North Node, also in Cancer. So Prince William was born on a solar eclipse. And if you have anybody in your family, or you are, or your friends, or people you know are born on an eclipse, they have a very specific destiny in life. And of course, do we need to know what William's destiny is? It's his destiny to be king. And of course, you know, every birthday we have this new moon, if you like, triggered by where the sun is. But of course, on this occasion, on his 40th birthday, it is another new moon, not an eclipse, but a new moon. And one of the ways to look at how this new moon impacts William and his future throughout the year is to look at his birthday chart or his solar return. But before I do that, I want you to look at his MCIC axis, which is at 2 degrees of Scorpio, midheaven, 2 degrees of Taurus, IC, with Jupiter sitting proudly on that midheaven. Now, I'm not sure whether you know this, but when Prince Charles was born, astrologers across the world were a little bit concerned, and they all felt, oh, this really wasn't a very kingly chart. And there were lots of mutterings about, you know, why was this? And in large part, it had to do with Jupiter's position, which wasn't in the best of positions. But here we can see with Prince William, loud and proud, Jupiter on the midheaven, here is our future king. And of course, he will be, even if he's not our next king, he is going to be our king in the future. Well, this is interesting because right now, as you can see, I've drawn a little line, a red line, to Pluto, where Pluto is at the moment 27 degrees of Capricorn. It's edging very close to Jupiter. And of course, Jupiter is his ruling planet because Sagittarius rises. And as we get into 2023, Pluto will be at 0 degrees of Aquarius, so it's going to be angling that Jupiter. So we certainly know there are going to be some big changes to his life direction in the next 12 months. And we can look at that a little bit closer by looking at his solar return or his birthday chart. So I'll come back to me just for a minute, and just before I look at William's solar return. And I want to say a little bit about solar return. We can all do this to our own charts. Every time we have a birthday, we can look at the sun returning to its exact same position as it was at birth. And the chart that is then unfolds from that now, 20 years on, 40 years on, 60 years on, whatever it is, sets a pattern for the year. Now, I'm not 100% for these solar returns. I think you can read a lot into them that aren't there. And I certainly don't agree with traveling to some other part of the world so that your solar return can look different. Now, there is a lot to be said for setting your solar return where you are at the time you celebrate your birthday. But certainly the solar return in reference to your natal chart is really important. So technically, you should really always take it from the birthplace and not where you happen to be living. And of course, that goes along with my pet thing, which I talked about a couple of videos back, this idea that you can have a relocation chart. If you are born in Sydney, Australia, and then you move to London, well, hey, your whole chart has changed now because you're living in London. No, it hasn't. There will be connections to the chart of London or the chart of Great Britain, and we can see, you know, where Saturn falls and all of those things, how it impacts your natal chart. But you haven't become a different person because you moved to London. You are who you are, and the moment you are born, the place, the time, that's a reflection of you, your soul, your destiny, everything. So, you know, it doesn't change. And this brings me round to the whole idea of the solar return. You can play around with it a bit. You can set it in the place you are for your birthday and have a look what it looks like. And you can set it for the place of birth. Now, in William's case, and let's now come and have a little look at Prince William's solar return. And of course, he's going to celebrate this in London, and he was born in London, so we don't really have a very conflicting, it's not a conflict here. We can see it. And my goodness, is this chart really impressive. The chart we're looking at right now is his solar return, which takes place on the 21st of June. So the new moon is yet to come, but of course it will move round from the 21st to the 29th and reach that sign. But in terms of a solar return chart, we're looking at this all-important Moon-Jupiter conjunction, which occurs in the 7th house of relationships. And one of the things I think that we need to look at, and this is in the context really of his point in life as well. I mean, he's not 2, he's not 10, he's 40. This is his 40th birthday. So we're also looking at the portents really as he moves into this next decade. So it's actually really, really important. So the Moon-Jupiter conjunction, and remember the moon is his sun ruler here, shows that there is expansion and growth in his relationship world. And we can look at that on 2 levels. We can look at the fact that, hey, his relationship with his wife, Catherine, Princess Kate, is going to get even bigger and better. And is it getting bigger and better because there is going to be a new addition to the family? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But of course, the moon and Jupiter in the relationship, the house, is also his relationships with the world, with other people that he comes into contact with. So it seems as though he's forging many, many new alliances during the coming 12 months. And of course, beyond that too. So for him, we can really, really see that this is going to be a year of growth for him. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time looking at his solar return and at him, because we want to get on and have a look at what the new moon is like sign by sign. But it is going to be an interesting period for William, as we saw during the course of the Jubilee celebrations, the Queen's 70th platinum anniversary, that he took a very significant role. And it's almost as though there's a kind of joint role going on with him and his father, Prince Charles, that they're sort of equally sharing the honors here. So I think that's going to be an interesting watch for the next 12 months. And I've got a few ideas which I'll air on another video and certainly in my Friday Bites. But let's get on with it. Let's have a look now, sign by sign, at what this new moon means. So let's start with Cancer. The new moon is in your sign. It is in the 1st house if you've got Cancer rising. So we have this idea of a new personal cycle beginning. And it might reflect, your general ambitions, but it is more to do with the things that matter to you personally, that are close to your heart. So this new moon is showing this new chapter opening, and there will be personal ambitions there that will either, come about. You'll be able to, events will conspire to help you start this new chapter, or you can consciously embrace this idea of the new beginning and officially begin some new things, because let's not forget that new moon is squaring Jupiter, so they're guaranteed growth. Now, I think in my last, the one before my videos, I talked about the idea of reinventing yourself. And I mentioned the idea of Madonna, who was born with the moon in her 1st house, the moon in Virgo, actually, and how important reinventing herself has been throughout her life. So with a kind of looking at the lunar cycle, if you like, this new moon in your 1st house, it's time for an image change. We could do with a refresher if we're Cancer, and we can do that physically by changing some aspect of our appearance. We could do it with our image and focusing on those things we now want to bring into the forefront of life and put our signature on. This new moon, as we know, is about growth, yes, maybe about inflation too. That also needs to be looked at. And if right now you do have a situation that's looking as though it might be getting out of control, it needs to be knocked on the head in this new moon cycle. In other words, the new moon to the full moon in Cancer on July the 6th. So let's move to the opposite sign now, and we look at this new moon in the 7th house for Capricorn. And if you have Capricorn rising, you've got the new moon in your 7th house. And the new moon here is about other people in your life. So you're either opening chapters with other people, which means you're embarking on new relationships or new contracts and new beginnings and new stages of a relationship. But because the moon and the sun are in the opposite sign, I'm not saying that it's other people who have the upper hand, but it is a period when you probably need to pay a little bit more attention to your partner's needs and feelings. You need to listen a little bit more to other people's demands and feelings and opinions, and you can make adjustments to them at this time. Now, of course, when the new moon comes into Capricorn, you're the one, you're empowered, and you're calling the shots. But for now, it may be other people calling the shots, and it might be a good idea to await invitations or offers or developments that might be brought about by your partners or by other people in your life. And of course, you are starting a new relationship cycle, and you may have chosen to do something that marks that, whether that's getting married or moving in together, or whether you've met or will meet somebody new on this new moon cycle, and you will form a long-term relationship with them. And it is really a good time to think about how you can freshen up your relationship life. I mean, things get very stale, and you need to change them up a bit. Introduce something new to your relationship life and watch the life in your relationships get better. So if we come now to Libra, or Aries first, I think, rather than Libra, we've got this new moon in the 4th house. So we're at the very base of your chart. And I always talk about this as the roots of life, but also the foundations of the future. So some new things are afoot here. Are there some new people coming into the family by marriage or birth? This is signified by the new moon. Are there changes in the home itself? Maybe some new furniture, maybe a new home per se. All these are typical reflections of a new moon here. But it's a little bit more deeper than that, a little bit deeper than that. And we think about the 4th house being the roots of life that go deep, deep down into the earth. If we were a tree, then our roots go deep into the earth. So there are new things are beginning to take root, and that's a good way of looking at them and being observant about the signals and the signs of new things beginning, because these new opportunities could take you far. They're part of your growth. Now, it's also about your history, and maybe for some of you, there is something you're going to learn about your family history, or something about yourself. And it may have something to do with your genes even, the idea that your gene pattern is now revealing something of itself that's very important to your growth and development. Be a really, really good time to do one of those ancestry things and to find out your genetic past, because it has a part to play in who you are right now. And you know how big I am on this. So the new moon is always about discoveries and new moons and new chapters and growth. And it applies particularly to your base in life, to the roots of who you are. And sometimes there are new opportunities career-wise as well, because the axis of the IC and the MC are just the opposite ends. So sometimes a new job or a new way forward, a new place in the world are also indicated by this new moon. And remember, we've got a fortnight for that. We've got 2 weeks until the full moon for that to become apparent. With Libra, we have the opposite. We have the new moon in the 10th house. So we're looking at things to do with your out in the world life. Now, not everybody has a career, but if you do, then this new moon will have a bearing on it. And it means there's a new phase coming into your career life. It may just be changes, subtle changes, new aspects of your career that are beginning to develop, and nothing changes radically. They're just new things coming in. But for a few of you, it's much more than that. There are real offers and changes coming into your career. And given that Jupiter is connecting to that, it can mean promotion. It can mean a new and better job, more money, more recognition, more ways to go. And it would be a really, really important time these next 2 weeks from the new moon on to really network and to approach people who you might consider your superiors, and with a little bit of a nudge to making progress. Also for joining forces. After all, Libra, you are the sign of relationship and cooperation. This is really going to be a good 2-week period for joining forces with people with a view to career progress. But of course, that 10th house, the midheaven, is about your place in the world. And that can be, your social status. So there could be a lot going on. Maybe you're going to be chairing a big and important event. Maybe you're going to be in the spotlight. There are all sorts of things that put you out there in the public eye. And it's certainly a time to get out there for whatever reason, whether it's for career, whether it's for relationships, whether it's just to enjoy being out there. That new moon is saying, go for it, do that thing. So if we come to the next group, where all the fixed signs, that's Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. And these are the fixed houses as well. And I always say these houses are about, they're about security in some ways. They're about protection. They're about things being conducive to your growth, but in a way that adds to your stability in life. So these 4 houses, these 4 signs, are very concerned with stability and structure. So if we come first to Taurus, this new moon is in the 3rd house. Likewise, if you have Taurus rising, you've got this new moon in your 3rd house. And this is an area of communication and travel. So it's time to get your voice out there. It's time to exchange ideas with people. It's time to draw up a few plans. And it's time to really make use of your local facilities, your local neighborhood network. Sometimes I think we underplay that. We're so programmed into the idea of the internet, things going on all over the world and who we can connect to in different parts of the world. We sometimes forget that just outside our front door, there are organizations and people and neighbors who are really, really central to our growth and happiness. And this new moon is all about strengthening those connections with your neighborhood, any which way, make the most of your neighborhood. It also has a lot to do with the media, with education. Perhaps you're going to be starting a new course. You're going to acquire some new skills. You're going to get letters after your name. You're going to embark on some form of learning, the acquisition of knowledge, all of which is going to be good for your life in general. And it's a good time to start something that is conducive to adding to what you can do in life. Let's look at it just like that. Sometimes, of course, this area of the chart has to do with your siblings, if you've got them, or your friends who you feel as brothers and sisters. And it may mean there's a new big friendship or a new brother and sister coming into the world, or maybe just some new kind of opportunity with your siblings. And as in all families, siblings fall out. We've got to look at Harry and William to see how that happens. And maybe this is the time to make a new start, because you know, when we're whole in our family and when we're with our siblings, it's a good thing. We're on the same page. We're from the same family. Let's keep it together. So that new moon is offering all those various possibilities. If we come to Scorpio, then this new moon is in the 9th house. And the 9th house is all about that big wide world. It's about, you know, other countries, people in distant places. It's about knowledge, but sort of more rarefied knowledge. It's a time to get really, really interested in quite esoteric things, spiritual things. It's a time to read a lot of great novels. And if you're at all writerly, maybe it's time to start planning out that great novel you mean to write. And it's almost as though life is a bit of a novel. You may even think that from day to day around the time of that new moon to full moon cycle. My goodness, you couldn't write this. You know, my life is a novel. But I think it's also about your life in the future in terms of where you are right now and where you're hoping to be. You know, this 9th house is about travel. We think about going on big journeys in the 9th house, and maybe you're going to do that as well. Maybe the new moon is symbolic of a long journey and you already know about it. You've got your seats booked, you're off and running, that's it. But life is a journey. And if we think about where we're headed, what is our flight plan, then that's what this new moon is about. Is the flight plan suitable to where our destination? And if it's not, if we're hoping to get to Naples and actually the plane is going to Toronto, that's not a good idea. We need to get the right flight plan. And this new moon offers you an opportunity to really align yourself with where you want to be way down the line. Yes, we might think of it in terms of destiny, so that things that happen around the time of the new moon are kind of destined and that they get you on track with your destiny. But it can also be a thought thing that we think about and try to realign ourselves so that we are on trajectory for those things that we want to be 5, 10 years down the line. So if we come to Leo, we're in the 12th house. This new moon, of course, happening in your preceding sign. And of course, later on in July, the sun will come out of the 12th house and move into your own sign. So the sun is taking 4 weeks to move through this very secretive, low-key area of the chart. And a lot of people get lost in the 12th house. A lot of astrologers think, what is this 12th house all about? Institutions, you know, the idea of oneself undoing. You know, what do I do with that? What does that mean? Well, because the 12th house is the beginnings of all things. It's both the ending and the beginning. And in the 12th house, we tie up a lot of things. We close them down. It's a time of dissolution in preparation for the new. And it's also about the big sea of the unconscious mind. So we plant a lot of seeds of what will come into being further down the line. When we've got the sun in the 12th house and we've got a new moon in the 12th house, then opportunities are taking root at a kind of subliminal level. We might not notice them. We might not know where they begin. And of course, it is a very spiritual house, and it's perhaps a good time to renew your spiritual life at the time of the new moon. I mean, we all have different spiritual persuasions, and it's good to reconnect with them, because there's no doubt about it. When we are attuned and aligned with our spiritual self, our soul self, then we're stronger and it feels better. And that opportunity is arising as that new moon squares Jupiter for you to reconnect with your soul and certainly your spiritual persuasion. That's certainly something to think about, Leo, at that particular time. If we come to Aquarius, the new moon is in the 6th house. And as I always say about the 6th house, it's where we do the work of life. And that's such a massive thing, isn't it? I mean, life, beginning to end, we're always working at life and doing the work of life. I mean, even if we don't work for a living per se, we don't have a job, our days comprise of some aspect of work, even if it's housekeeping or it's dealing with people that we must deal with during the course of our daily life. The things that constitute our daily life are the work of life. So the new moon here means there's a new beginning coming in. So there's a new aspect to what you consider to be work, both in the sense of the work you do for a living, but also your daily life. And it is appropriate to have a new routine. Just how often do we get trapped in our daily routine? We get up at the same time, we have a cup of tea, we have a cup of coffee, we head out to work, we get the baby up, you know, whatever it is that constitutes our day. And by the time we've got to 6 or 8 o'clock, it's like, where did the day go? I haven't even begun my magnum opus. So really, this new moon is about sorting your life out, your daily life out, and blocking out time for you to be able to do the things that are important. I mean, ultimately, what we leave behind is our 6th house. What have we given to our fellow man? What have we left behind? What have we been doing with the work and life of life? And so it's important to create time for things that we think of are worthwhile. And I suppose with both Leo and Aquarius in this new moon, it is about rebooting your health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, rebooting it, starting a new program, because that's good too. It sets things going for the next 12 months, actually, until we get the next new moon in that area. So our final group, the mutables, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. And we look here at Pisces, and of course, this new moon is with your fellow mutables, fellow water sign, Cancer. So there's an instant harmony between this new moon and your sun sign. If you've got Pisces rising, this new moon will be in your 5th house. And if you are a Pisces, we consider it your 5th house. So this is a very creative sector. Now, so many ways you can be creative. You can be creative with artistic projects. You can be creative with cooking. You can be creative with finances. And you can be procreative. And how do you get procreative? It's because you find someone who you are romantically inclined to. So this is why this 5th house has a lot to do with romance as well, because it's part of the procreative program. So we get a new moon here, and it signifies maybe a new romance, a new stage of a romance. It can signify a new beginning, perhaps a new baby coming into being, the start of the procreative, gestative program. And of course, that's a wonderful celebratory thing. But it can also be this area where we kind of find ourselves. You know, this is the real us. This is our inner self, who we are, our inner child. So doing a lot of things that we really enjoy doing, whether that is being on holiday or being with people we love or having a lot of events that make us feel terrifically happy. But this is where we come back to creativity again, because when we're involved in a creative act or a procreative act, it's a very happy thing, usually. And I often recommend, and I certainly recommend it to myself, when I'm feeling blue, I've got a little bit negative, I get my teeth into a new creative project. And before I know where I am, I feel terrific. You know, I'm putting my personal energy into something, and I've got an end result, or at least something in view. That's the focus and the meaning of this new moon for you, Pisces. For Virgo, then we're looking at the 11th house, and that's also quite a creative area, but it isn't creative in just the me sense. This is the we sense. This is you as part of a team. And when you get a new moon here, it emphasizes the importance of teamwork. 2 heads are better than 1. And even in a one-on-one relationship, when you consider yourself to be a team, my goodness, do you make progress? If you're on the same team, you have the same goal. And often that's something I work with, as I may have said before, with my clients who are having a really difficult time of it in a relationship. You know, I say, think of yourself as a team. You're both on the same team. And the family is all that team, your team Smith, team Jones. And by working towards a common goal, you unite. And you can think of this in any way you want. You could think of this in your work, coming together in teams. A lot of work and career matters do depend on people working as a team. And just getting the idea of the unity that that team offers because it's a common goal is really, really an important factor. And a new moon can mean a new enterprise, a new team effort. It can even mean a social project. So you could be starting a new social project that's going to come about in the future, and it demands cooperation from other people. This is also an area of the chart where we find our humanity. So getting involved in humanitarian interests, in really connecting to people who maybe need our help or who need our involvement in their lives. This new moon signifies that new opportunity, either coming to you or you yourself getting behind it. So Gemini, this new moon is in the second house. And in the second house, it's all about self-worth, what we have, who we are as a person, what value there is in ourselves, but also our assets in terms of the things we have that are our material assets. And there's a direct connection between both of these areas, because when we've been rich in life, you know, that can be just a statement in itself. You don't necessarily have to have money in the bank and lots of possessions. But certainly if we feel rich and fulfilled, if we're going for interviews where we're negotiating funds or whatever it may be to do with money, when we're going in with a full sense of value in ourselves, we come out of that negotiation better. So it is the idea of really affirming your value. And it isn't as simple as saying, I am full of value, because some little voice in your interior will shout back at you, no, you're not. So you need to look at what you are in terms of substance, what solid things you know, you do, you are, you have, that are of value, what makes you a person of value. And that's a lot easier to deal with, because when you then go forward and you're trying to make money or you're negotiating funds, you know that you have something to bring to the table. Now, this new moon indicates a new cycle for all things to do with self-worth, making money, earning money, moving money around, however you want to look at that, investments. So there could be a new source of income coming your way in the next couple of weeks, or a new way of generating income. So it may come back to you to think of that way to generate money, or to be clever with money so that you can make it go further. And this idea of a new cycle linked to enrichment is really important, both in the sense of being observant to the opportunities there are and the things that happen, but also the focus on yourself. You know, you have the power to make money, to add value to your life. And the ways you can do that are important to discover and to affirm that you can do that. Last but not least, we come to Sagittarius, because this new moon for you is in the 8th house. And the 8th house is also a financial house, but it's monies that come to you, which is where we get the idea of inheritances and settlements, redundancy settlements, divorce settlements, those kind of things. And so the idea of a new source of income coming to you from other people is one way of looking at this new moon. But it's also in reference to the relationships you have. And sometimes in that 8th house, we discover how to be given to. It's not easy. Sometimes it's a lot easier to give, isn't it? You're in control when you're doing the giving. But when you're doing the receiving, it's a little bit more passive. a little bit more difficult. How do you receive? How do you accept money from other people? How do you work in those financial relationships when other people hold the power and you don't? Whew, it's a tricky one. And of course, that's why this 8th house area is about sex and intimacy as well, because it's where what we receive from others in regard to that intimate connection. You know, it's where we have to give and open ourselves up to receiving. So on the surface of things, a new sexual relationship, a new financial relationship, whether it's with a credit card company or a bank or something new coming about, where your relationship with organizations or another person is going to develop. It's a growth thing. Remember, we've got Jupiter in on that. So either way, whether we look at this area as the area of intimacy or whether we look at it as financial, there's growth portrayed there. So I think that's me gone through all 12 signs. And, you know, it is a general look. It's not very specific. And that's why I like to do things with a horoscope at the beginning of my videos every time, so that we can see astrology in all its beauty, because there's so much more to it than just, you know, I'm a Pisces or I've got a new moon in my sign. A little bit more important than that. Which brings me on to my conclusion. And it really relates to what I was talking about in the idea of the summer solstice, the sun reaching its highest point, or it's the earth reaching its closest point to the earth, the sun being highest overhead, giving us its warmth and energy. It's at a peak. And of course, the next day, even the 22nd of June, it's on its journey back down. We are in the Northern Hemisphere moving further and further away from the sun again, and the reverse in the Southern Hemisphere, moving closer and closer to the sun. And there's this idea that at the peak of something, you're about to enter decline. And that's a very interesting concept, because it's easy to see this in terms of the astrology and the astronomy. We know that at the peak of the sun is beginning its decline, and we can see that. We know it. We understand it. But in our lives, we don't know that. We don't know when we're at the peak of our success, because thereafter there is decline. But there are all sorts of peaks and declines through our lives, many, many different ones. You know, we say we're at our sexual peak at men in their early 20s, or is it 18 or 19? I can't remember. So decline thereafter. We'll say that to a lot of men and they won't really agree with you. Technically, that's where it is. But do you ever know that moment where you are in decline, whether it's sexual or whether it's, you know, in terms of your energy levels, whatever it is, you may not know. And vice versa. When we're at the peak of our unhappiness and the peak of our difficulties, that moment we may not know. But there is this idea, and it's worth bearing in mind, that certainly when we recognize, and we do sometimes, I've done it myself, I've sort of got to that point and I think, wow, how amazing is life? How fortunate am I? How easy it is to be successful, fulfilled, blah, blah, blah. I should have known that at that point, you begin your journey back down again. It doesn't mean that you'll go right back to the beginning, but there is certainly a cycle of decline before that in turn becomes a new upward cycle. And when we feel that life is at its worst, nothing can get worse. No more things can possibly go wrong. We couldn't feel more unhappy, more rejected, more helpless, whatever those adjectives are. That's almost certainly the point. You are beginning your upward cycle. So it is worth celebrating our great success, but with humility, recognizing it's not going to be sustained. Our happiness is not going to be sustained. It's unrealistic. But even if there is decline thereafter, there will be another upcline, if you can have that, another ascent. And the same, really and truly with the moments of our lives where we really do feel that there is nothing more to life. But yes, there is. And it's at that point that we're going to turn the corner. All right, so that is the end of my video. And I hope you enjoyed it, taken a lot away from it. And I look forward to being here for you in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.